She stands up, walks over, and peeks in through a hole in the castle door. There she sees 3 fearsome giants sitting at a kitchen table, laughing and having a burping contest. They have just finished eating a flock of swans, 3 baby bears, and a barrel of gerbils. The giants are picking their teeth with telegraph poles. Did you ever hear of giants? Yeah? But these are not the friendly giants of these days. They are the cruel killer giants of them days. And Helen has heard many stories about these very giants, how they have killed and eaten hundreds of people and destroyed the homes and farms of many more. The 3 giants are brothers, and their names are Bullybummus, Arsenpuffin, and Dunch. Dunch is most particularly known for tearing up farmers' crops, Arsenpuffin for burning people's homes to the ground, and Bullybummus for eating people in one gulp. His motto is, one chomp, no chew. And there they sit at the table, dressed in clothes that they themselves have clumsily stitched together out of hundreds of shirts, dresses, socks, coats, and trousers, stolen from their poor dead victims. Everyone wants to rid the kingdom of these gruesome creatures. So Helen comes up with a clever plan. She thinks to herself that she'll take her slingshot and bung a stone at Bullybummus, who was sitting at the middle of the table with one brother at each end. She puts in a stone, hauls back, and fires right through the hole. It strikes the giant thwack on the left side of his neck. The stone bounces off, but it stings the old brute. Bullybum roars at Arsenpuffin. Beastly, beastly beest thee! Why didst thou fire at me? Arsenpuffin snaps back. Beastly beest thee? 'Tweren't me. I didn't fire nothing at thee. The big bully picks up a huge knife and bellows, Yes, thou didst. Fire again and lose thy life, for I'll lop off your head with his girt big knife. Helen snickers, and she fires another stone at him. Whammo! Well, the old giant is in a rage. With no more to do, he takes the big knife and he chops Arsenpuffin's head clean off. Then Helen goes around to the other side of the castle, finds another door with another hole, fires again, and strikes Bullybummus thwick, sharp as a needle, on the right cheek. The old giant roars with pain, then turns to his brother Dunch and yells, Beastly, beastly beest thee! Why didst thou fire at me? Sure didn't I just lop off the other fellow's head? Hast thou a hankering to end up dead? Dunch replies, Beastly beest thee? 'Tweren't me. I wouldn't fire nothing at thee. Sure, when I sees thee, bully, my heart skips. I loves thee more than ripped up parsnips. But the older giant cannot be budged, and he whispers fiercely through his orange and yellow teeth, Strike again and lose thy life, for I'll level thy shoulders with his girt big knife. Helen lobs another stone and strikes him again. Thwack! Well, the giant grabs the big knife and he chops Dunch's head off. Oh, that was all right, says Helen. Now that's 2 of them gone, dead as dust. Helen doesn't stop to think, but she picks up another stone and lets fly.
I'm Michelle Porter. I'm with Running the Goat Books and Broadsides, and we're here today to celebrate Andy Jones's new book, Barefoot Helen and the Giants. And one of the things we love to do is to have a conversation between the author and the illustrator. Yes. And so we have illustrator Katie Brosnan here, who did these beautiful, lively illustrations for the book, bringing to life Barefoot Helen, and we love that. So for this launch, it's a conversation between Andy and Katie. Andy Jones, of course, is an actor, writer, storyteller, and director living in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. He's the co-adapter of the award-winning folktale, Peg Bearskin, and author of acclaimed series of Jack's Tales. In 2019, he was named the Order of Canada in recognition of his contributions to the culture of Newfoundland and Labrador. And Katie Brosnan is a children's author and freelance illustrator. She earned an MA in children's book illustration with distinction from the Cambridge School of Art. Her books have received considerable acclaim. Keith was longlisted for the UK's Klaus Flug Prize, correct me if I've mispronounced that, for the most exciting newcomer to picture book illustrations. And I've loved that, Katie. And Gut Garden for the UK School Library Association's Information Book Award in the 8 to 12 category. So we have two very talented people, and I'm so happy to listen to this conversation. I will leave now and come back at the end. See you later.
I really love your illustrations, and I was just so happy when the book arrived. I was just blown away, and it's very catchy, and I just love the your take on Helen. And like, again, it's so wonderful when you get the illustrations from the illustrator, and you realize that there's another whole way of seeing all the things that you've been seeing.
Oh, that's really lovely to hear, because I was like, yeah, it's quite nerve-wracking illustrating someone else's story and trying to imagine the characters, but it was just such a pleasure to illustrate this book, because it's just full of so much like vibrant characters, and I love how playful it is. So it just seemed like, I don't know, it just felt like such a fun book to illustrate. So yeah, I'm really pleased that you're happy with it. Yeah.
Do you associate in any way with the character of Helen, or are you interested in nature? Or are you an outdoors person?
Yeah, I really love Helen. I love how she's so well, I love how she can survive in nature, like her sort of, she's obviously like a forager, hunter kind of, she's got those skills, and she could sort of sustainably live on her own in nature. I would love to be like that. I'm not, but I do definitely identify with the way that she, especially when she doesn't want to move to the city, she'd prefer to stay in the sort of country. I can really understand that position, and sort of the kind of, she's able to sort of be fulfilled kind of on her own, or in her own kind of world. So it's like, because she's kind of learnt to depend on herself, and I think that's like a really important thing, and I definitely identify with that. I prefer to be in nature than in a big city with loads of people everywhere. So I was really interested by this because I'd seen some of your previous stories and the Jack Tales, and so I was interested in the reason why you chose to create this Helen character.
And I wrote the first draft as Jack, and one day I just thought, what would change about this story if it were a woman as the main character? And so I just, breezily decided to just change, select all Jack, change to, and I just picked Helen as a name. I like that name. And then I realized, I had to change all the pronouns too. So I had to do all the he's into she's and so on. And then I read it and thought, gee, it doesn't seem to work quite as well. Some things I had to change things. Well, one thing was, of course, that Jack falls in love with the princess, and so my first thought was, well, I guess I'll make it a prince. And I thought, well, why not just have a love between two women? And then I had always wanted to do the idea of a wild child. That's one of those stories that always appealed to me. So I went to the French version of the same story in French Newfoundland, on the West Coast, Cape St. George, to Angela Kerfont, and she tells the same story, but it's also Jack. But in that one, Jack has a bow and arrow. So then I came up with the idea of the slingshot. In terms of your art, how did you begin? Like, what was your early years, and did you always want to be an illustrator, or did you want to be another kind of artist, or did you fall into it? How did that happen?
I always drew, or I was kind of drawn to making things, and so then I did study fine art at university the first time round, and I sort of came out of that with an art degree, but it's really difficult to get a job in art. So I did other things, but I always had this, that I still had this kind of urge that I needed to make things and I needed to keep creating. So I actually got into printmaking. I did a printmaking course, and then I started doing sort of making prints and cards and things and selling them at markets in my spare time. So I was still working another job. I think one of the first things I made was a little zine that was about strangers, encounters with strangers, and it was little stories that I picked up from just things that happened, and then kind of trying to put a funny spin on them. And then I found out about the master's course in children's book illustration, and then so I was just really amazed when I got onto that course, because I didn't think I'd get a place, and then it's just really changed my life, because I just realised it was sort of telling stories visually and writing alongside working with the image and text, and is something that I really love doing. Something that I believe is that people that are creative can turn their hands to a lot of different things. Yeah, and so I've written 2 books myself, but then obviously this year I've worked on illustrating your book and illustrating someone else's book as well. So that's been really interesting to just be working on illustration. It's
I can't tell you how wonderful it is when that time comes when when the pictures arrive. It's just incredible to think, oh, that someone else is seeing something else in your work. Yeah, no, even that, just I can see that moment when Marty handed me the book. I was sitting in my backyard, and just all of a sudden I was going down a different road.
I wondered if you personally connected with any of the characters in the story, because I think they're really richly drawn, the characters, and I just kind of wondered if you had a personal connection to Helen or any of the others.
I always find that the heroes of the books are from a different world that I'm from, to a great extent, and they're even from a different land that I'm from. So I think of it as being outside of me to a great extent. I'm not like Helen in the sense that I couldn't survive in the woods. I'm not one of those people who could do that. I really admire those people. And in Newfoundland, there's an expression, and they say he or she could put an arse in a cat. And that must be only in Newfoundland. It's people who can do anything. If a cat were to lose its arse somehow, how that would happen, I don't know. But they'll say, oh yeah, he can put an arse in a cat. And so, she's that kind of person in a way, except with nature.
But I think you'd probably be one of the storytellers at this festival.
Maybe, yeah. Although I'm not a storyteller the real traditional storytellers. Of course, I guess in some ways there's none of those left now. Maybe in other parts of the world, but certainly in Western civilization, Western culture. But there's another whole movement of storytelling, which is a new thing, which is wonderful. But I know that when they told the stories, they always told them differently every time. And I don't quite do that. I tend to learn my story and then tell it more or less the same way.
A sort of timeless setting, though, isn't it? Your the story. It feels like it's
Yeah, yeah. That's why I like, and your illustrations are not too set in any time or place either, which I like. I like that. It's like it's not like Newfoundland. There's no clapboard houses and there's no seaside views and so I really like that. I don't want to be specific. I want it to be in another world, but you also created another world. So this is a whole new world, and that's where we're going. But it's not a world that I've seen or anyone else has seen before. That to me is the perfect combination. When you read the text, did you see anything specifically local, or it might be from another place that you thought this might be particularly Newfoundland?
There were things in the text like the fishing, obviously the fishing references, and I think there was something relating to the giants having sort of taken all the fish because because there was no fish left. So I think that was kind of inferred a bit, and I wondered whether there was a bigger kind of reference to sort of the history of the area and kind of fishing being taken over.
And of course, people want to come in and take your resources. That's the general thing. Is anyone in the world who has any resources knows, like the Middle East, for example, which has been so torn apart by all of that.
That's what I felt. So I felt that the giants kind of could be a sort of, a sort of symbol of that in a way, because they're kind of feeding off the resources of the area. I know that's not said, but that's how I kind of imagined them when I was drawing them. And so it also gave me more reason in my mind for Helen to straight away want to get rid of them. But as you said, it's definitely like an other place as well. It's not completely tied to Newfoundland or anywhere. It's quite magical, really.
Yeah. That's interesting about the storytelling hotel. I find that so interesting too. I just when I first read that, Mr. Freeman Bennett's version of Jack and the Three Giants, which is one of the first things I ever read from those books, and it's an exact transcription of him telling that story. I thought, what a great idea! Storytelling hotel. You get a free meal if you tell a good story. And of course, that's quite true. Is that Newfoundland? People think that we were isolated, but in fact, we were not isolated. In fact, we were, right on the shipping lanes, and many ships for many years, and eventually airplanes all had to come to Newfoundland because that was the trip, and then you went on there down to Boston and New York. So we had a lot of people. So a lot of stories came in here. And storytelling, and then and also Newfoundlanders themselves took their schooners and went across the Atlantic. Most amazing thing from these small communities. They would sometimes go down to the West Indies and then sell the fish there and get molasses and bring molasses to England, and then get or even sometimes to France, and then get wine and bring the wine to England, and then come back. So these small ships and people were doing that. So we were very much in touch with the whole world, not like as opposed to sometimes small rural areas that are farmers don't get that input. So
it's amazing. Yeah, I guess in a way it's like, well, because my family on both sides both come from Ireland as well. I know you just mentioned that your family come from Ireland, but that's sort of quite true of Irish culture as well, that they the Irish had to leave at various times, and like a lot of my family migrated to America or other places. So yeah, there's quite a lot of that kind of I suppose culture there as well.
Mary Lynn wanted me to ask you, if you were a dog, what kind of dog would you be?
You're right. That's a funny one. Oh, I didn't know that one. Oh, that's really hard. I was a dog. Well, I think I would be like, like a bit of a mix of a few dogs. Like, I'd like to be just like one of those dogs that you don't know what dog they are, but they're a bit scruffy probably.
Yeah.
I think I'd be one of those. I always like those kind of dogs.
Yeah, they're clever dogs. They live downtown. And, there's a name for those in Newfoundland.
Oh, what is it?
They're called crackies.
Cracky.
Yeah. That's a little cracky. It's a little dog that every time you go by the video store, you see this little dog hanging around like that. He's kind of can't tell what breed he is, and they're downtown St. John's dogs. They're called crackies.
Oh, right. Yeah, cracky. Yeah.
But it's also a term for a kind of a saucy girl too, right? She's a bit of a cracky, right? She's like, yeah.
Oh, you're right. So what kind of dog would you be, Andy?
I think I'd be the same thing. I'd be like,
Yeah.
I always think of a bit of cracky. Like there was a dog down the corner here called Shadow. And everyone knew Shadow. He was always around, and he didn't seem to be owned by anybody. But eventually, he definitely got our dog pregnant. So we had a bunch of Shadows puppies. I know eventually, and, but that's the kind of dog I think I'd be. I'd love to be that dog who's just, he's got 3 or 4 houses he probably lives in. People are feeding him in different places, and
Yeah.
that I just love. It'd be a great story, actually. It'd be a great. And that's not the kind of stories I usually write, but that'd be good for you to write. St. John's. Come to St. John's and write about the St. John's cracky.
Yeah. A lot of character. I can imagine it now. Actually, where I used to live, there was always a dog that used to live at the newsagents. So he was kind of outside most of the day, but he was. And at first, I'd be a bit worried about him because he'd be outside, but he was really happy, and he'd go. Then his owner obviously worked there and would take him for a walk and then come back. And it wasn't like every single day he was there, but he liked to just watch people outside, I think.
Yeah.
Check out who was coming into his shop.
Yeah. All the news. Yeah. I love those dogs.
Yeah.
Well, I've come back now to thank the both of you.
Thank you.
I'll have to say that I would, if I could choose to be a dog, I would choose to be a cat. I don't know, their lifestyle seems so much more my speed. It's been a fascinating conversation. I've been listening in the background, but from the storytelling hotel, illustrations, and the giants as a symbol of feeding off all the resources.
I wish I'd talked to you before I wrote the book. Next time I'll send you the text before we get done. No, I like that. I like that. That's what they should have done, was had him somehow destroy the fishery.
Oh.
Because Lily and Mose have to move on to fishing.
Right. That's right. Yeah. So we don't exactly.
I felt like, and they're like a menace, aren't they? So I just sort of felt like they were maybe the menace that was.
Yeah. I wish I could have pointed that out better.
All right, I'm going to say thank you and end the recording. We will be continuing after the recording, so stay tuned. All right, Andy, it's you and me. How are you?
Good. How are you?
You can hear me. Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us and for writing this lovely book and filming that, having that conversation with Katie Brosnan. I loved my part in it. We're just to let everybody out there know, I'm Michelle Porter. And of course, I'm with running the Goat Books and Broadsides, and chatting now with Andy Jones after the conversation he had with Katie Brosnan. And we're taking any questions that you have. So we'll go over the comments and go through some of the questions. But first, Andy, tell us where you are, because you're not in St. John's right now, are you?
No, I'm in Capeland Cove, in Hants Harbour, in Trinity Bay, in Newfoundland. And I'm at my friend Calvin Tuck's house, Calvin and Geraldine Tuck. And they have Wi-Fi, because our house doesn't have electricity yet. And so I'm out here and having a good time doing some writing here. And I see that Heather Logan has signed on, my niece, and Joanne Moore, my sister-in-law, and Mary Walsh and Mary Barry, and a bunch of other people. And Martha, my daughter Martha, and my granddaughter Franny are all out there. Christine LeGros was there.
It's a great little digital party.
Yeah, it's great. Jackie Logan's there also. And Iris Mackey is there, and Taya Rosenberg is there too, I think. Yeah, Taya's there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And a few other people who I think Marnie is taking care of in the background. So
okay.
Heather Logan writes a question for you. She says, Andy, I'm here with Joe, Lucy, and Will. Will would like to know how you come up with your ideas for books.
Well, Will, and Will is my nephew, also my grandnephew. I really, from all the children's books, I go to stories that are already told in the folk tale world, and I start off with that story, and then I usually take the Newfoundland version of that story that were collected and recorded in Newfoundland back in the 50s and the 60s, 1950s and 1960s. And then I take that story and then I look at all the other versions of the story that I can find all over the world. And I think about it and then I start from scratch and I write a new version of the story. That's my own version. And I fill in a lot of the stuff about the characters that's not in the stories. And I also usually stick to the plot of the story. So, for example, if I was going to do Jack and the Beanstalk, it'd be pretty much the same plot. He'd get the beans, he'd throw the beans, but I would say, well, who is Jack and the Beanstalk? He might be a guy like Will, like yourself, Will. It's like I could model him on you, and then I might call your mother and say, what's some stuff about Will that you could tell me, and I would put that into the story, and then he'd have to have a sister, so he'd have Lucy, and so I would change the story that way, just according to things that happened in my own life and ideas I've had and things that I've liked from other stories and books over the years.
Now, what do you add a bit of Newfoundland to it? Do you add a bit of Andy Jones to it? What do you think you're adding to it?
I'm always adding Newfoundland stuff to it, and like I was saying earlier, I'd like it to be. It sort of happens in a place that's not anywhere, but yet it's filled with Newfoundland references. But I never actually say the word. I've only ever said the word Newfoundland once in one of the books. But other than that, it's kind of a romantic version of Newfoundland that's it comes from my own brain, I guess.
So I wanted to know, actually, so there's a little bit of your writing process, but what do you actually do to write? Do you go to your office? Do you go, I mean, I know that you would go outside of the house for a little bit. Where do you go to get your best writing done?
Well, I usually do go to an office. That's what I have in St. John's. I've had for about 35 years. The room over on Queens Road. And right now I'm actually doing some writing out here in Capeland Cove and Hants Harbor. And as I'm out here, of course, I'm thinking about my granddaughter, Franny, who's watching me right now, I think. Hello, Franny. I love you. And Martha and Jessie. And so, because Franny loves to come here to Hants Harbor, and it's got lots of stuff for her here. And it's a very peaceful and very quiet place. And the weather has been so incredible lately that I've just loved. I love writing here, but nothing really helps you to write. I don't think.
There's no secret place. There's no magic formula. It's
There's
not
no place. There's no secret place. I wish there was. I mean, I guess you couldn't if you were in the middle of a jackhammer factory. But I mean, other than that, it's just like. Unfortunately, the bad news is that you have to sit down and just stay at it.
Just do it, right? Ruin your back on the chair. So Mary Walsh says, Andy, can you tell us about Mr. Power? I know nothing about this, so that might be interesting.
Oh yes, well, really, the reason I ever started telling stories or getting really interested in folktales was because of Anita Best. Anita Best is a great singer, beautiful voice, and great Newfoundland folklorist and wonderful storyteller. Maybe the best storyteller around these days. And so we were making a film, a feature film years ago, and we had all these big, I guess they were sort of parties, but they were supposedly kind of, think sessions for this movie. And Anita Best came, and I'd known Anita for a good while, and she told me about the Jack Tales, and I'd never heard of them other than Jack and the Beanstalk. And she told me that there was this tradition in Newfoundland, and not only that, but that she was married to Pius Power, who was the son of Pius Power Sr., who was an incredible, wonderful, traditional storyteller in the old tradition of the oral tradition. So I eventually, luckily, got to go out to a place called Southeast Bight, although he's originally from Clattis Harbour West, which was resettled. Got to go to Southeast Bight, got to go to Anita and young Pius's wedding, and got to meet Mr. Power, and got to hear him tell the stories. And he was an absolutely amazing storyteller. And of course, from him, we got the story Jack Meets the Cat, which he called Jack Ships to a Cat. And that was like the gateway drug to my habit of storytelling.
You can thank him or blame him, I guess.
I thank him. He's an amazing storyteller. Yeah.
So Martha writes, Franny says, hi, Grandpa, it's nice to see you. And where does Helen live?
Where does Helen live? That's Franny's question. Okay. Helen lives, I think, if I had to pick a place where Helen lives, I think she lives, you know where our house is in Capeland Cove? If you go back through the woods, all the way right to the little pond, it's called Uncle's Pond, and I think she's got her little cabin where she lives now with her kids and with Antoinette, right up there, right into the hills around Uncle's Pond.
That's a beautiful place to live. I want to go live with Helen, and I think Katie Brosnan does too, the illustrator.
Yes.
So, and I guess related to that, I'll ask, Andy, you and I talked about who's Jack, with all your Jack stories. Who's Jack? What does Jack represent? Who is Helen?
Helen is, well, I think she's just a unique character. She's somewhat in the Jack tradition, but not quite. I just think that she's a, very able and very clever and independent young woman. And she's just a great, she's kind of a force of nature, and she's deeply part of nature. So, which I think is good in these times when we're trying to get back to some version of nature that we knew, and save the environment. So she's, a natural environmentalist, I guess, and someone who feels that she can survive in the real natural world, and so she does, and she's chosen to do that. So I guess.
Is she like any woman that you know? Is she aspirational?
Yes, I guess she is. But yeah, I can't think of anybody right offhand, but certainly there are women who are like that for sure, and who love to be out in nature and are independent. My wife, Mary Lynn Bernard, who everybody knows, I'm sure, who's listening in. Mary Lynn is a person who is absolutely, amazed at every tree that she sees. She knows the names of all the trees. She's always studying trees. She is always interested in all the birds that are around, and the name of the birds and what they do, what their habits are. And she's also, like Helen, a great picker of blueberries. She loves blueberries more than life itself, and partridge berries and gooseberries and every kind of berry.
Now,
So,
this was a good berries. Yeah.
what's that?
Oh, I'm saying now this was a good year for berries. So
This is a great year. Oh my God. Oh my God. It's amazing. So I guess if there's any one person that Helen is most like, it would be Mary Lynn.
I love that. I can see that. So Heather Smith asks, Andy, do you write every day?
No, no. I write, kind of to a deadline, and they can be quite soft deadlines because I might have a grant to do something. But I write, so I have to realize I have to start the process, and then I get going, and then I try. I sort of forgotten because I haven't written right now I'm writing a one-person show again, and that's a different process than the folktales. So the folktales take me 2 or 3 years now, but I stop and start and stop and start over that period of time. And then Marnie says, look, we need a draft by such and such a time. So then I really get it together, and I stop and I go back, which is a very good thing to be able to do it, to be able to stop and leave it for a while. But I don't write every day. No.
So Heather Logan writes again, Lucy has been writing a novel with her friend and wonders what you do when you encounter writer's block or just don't feel like writing. Do you need somebody like, Marnie to give you a call and say, I need a draft tomorrow?
Yes, that helps. But I think that, I know there's long times when you can't write, but I guess what I always do is try to trick myself by saying, I will go to the office tomorrow morning and I will work for 1 hour. And if I can just work for 1 hour and not get off the seat for 1 hour, then I get a cookie or a cup of tea. So I'll go and try to get through the hour or the half hour, whatever it is. Or sometimes if you're desperate, it's 15 minutes. Just stay with that and then get your cookie. And then sometimes you'll find that that you'll stay for another half an hour or another hour. And then, that might work for a little while. And then I find that when I'm writing a bigger piece, like a full piece, like a stage piece, an hour and a half or whatever, then I will have to keep trying that and starting that again and again and again. And then what I like to do is I like to have somebody, like often it's Charlie Tomlinson. I work with Charlie a lot. And so at a certain point, I'll starting having meetings with Charlie, like official, like dramaturgical meetings or whatever. And I'll tell him my ideas, and then he'll, we'll go back and forth. And then I will leave him for a while, and another month later, I might say, I'm moving a bit further ahead, and then I talk to him. So having somebody you can talk to, I find good.
Yeah.
Lucy?
Esme Berman Park asks, what's your favorite place to write, the place that inspires you the most? I think we talked a little bit about this earlier, but is it about inspiration or just showing up at your desk?
Hi, Esme. Oh my gosh, that's great. I'm so glad that you're listening in. I don't think that there's any place in particular, although for the first time in my life, I've found being out in the country has really helped me. I know Esme is a journalist, or just about to become a journalist. So you'll have deadlines more than I'll ever have. I think, like, again, you can't be, in a jackhammer factory and write. So there's certain things, of course, your dad is a great writer too. But I don't think it really matters that much. I actually can write, and I know a lot of younger people do this too, but I do it is go to a cafeteria or somewhere where nobody knows me, like at the university cafeteria, which I can't go to now. I sit in the window there looking at the traffic underneath, and I can write there. and also the University Library. The University Library is very good because you can't fall asleep, you can't snore, you can eat. You're allowed to eat at the library, but you can't actually fall asleep. But that helps me a lot because I tend to take naps, and then and also cafeterias and stuff like that because I don't mind white noise as long as no one talks to me. Oh.
Now, oh yes, there's lots of buzz about the possibility of a book about Trouty or the Cracky book. Are you going to write a book about Trouty, or are you going to follow up on that Cracky book idea? And after this, we'll take one more question if it comes in. And that'll be enough. Go on.
I like the idea of the Cracky book. I'd like to write that with Katie Brosnan. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
Katie, but that would be fun. Yeah, that would be fun to get a dog that leaves the part of England where Katie is and gets on a boat and ends up in St. John's or something. Yeah, that would be fun. That would be, and he could be called Trouty, and he could be based on our dog Trouty.
And I don't see any more questions.
Anne Walsh. Hello, Anne. My cousin who lives in the Northwest Territories, Whitehorse, Yellowknife.
And a librarian, right?
She's a librarian. Yes, she is. Yes.
Librarians are some of my favorite people because they have all the answers to my questions or no.
I know. The University Library in St. John's is just amazing.
It's so hard
to. And when you ask questions, they come back with all kinds of information.
Oh yes, folks might be interested to know that next month Andy will be recording an audio version of Helen. You must be excited about doing that.
Yes, we have all 6 books now. We'll have, or 5 books. We'll have audio books, and also they're going to be available on ebooks eventually too. Not very long from now.
There'll be so many different ways to get these gorgeous stories. I have a question. There's such a sense of a natural speaking rhythm in your stories. Where does that come from? Is it your theater background, do you think, that focus on dialogue? It's that your stories are told with that oral storytelling basis. You've got such great sense for sort of a funny but a realistic way of speaking.
Well, I'm always thinking that I'm going to be performing the work, but it's not exactly the same as if I were preparing to perform it. It would be different than when you write the story because obviously someone's sitting in the room reading it. But I do have that, and I spend a lot of time, me and Charlie Tomlinson, figuring out how to do one-person shows and how to talk to an audience and how to phrase things right for an audience. I spent years doing that. Yeah. So some of it must be leaking into the books.
All right. I'm going to let everybody know that if you want to get a copy of the book, you can go to runningthegoat.com. Or your local independent bookstore. We like to support independent bookstores as much as possible. Is there? I want to thank you again, Andy, for writing these lovely, rich books, for being wonderful to work with, and for coming here tonight to chat with me.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to everybody. To Heather and Joanne and Mary Walsh and Mary Barry and Taya Rosenberg and Heather Smith and Christine Legros and Heather Logan and Jackie Logan and Iris Mackey, all who called in, and Esme Park. So great to hear from you, Esme. And who else? Chantal and Franny and Martha. And Anne Walsh and Veselina Tomova and who else? You see all the other names. Esme Park and everybody. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone. That was so great that you all listened in. Thank you.
And thank you, Andy.
And thanks to Calvin Tuck and Geraldine Tuck, who gave me their house today and their sewing room and computer room.
they're perhaps the most important people tonight.
Absolutely.
All right, great.
Anne-Marie Walling. Anne-Marie Walling's there too.
Yeah.
Anne-Marie was one. Many of the people who were in tonight, including Anne-Marie Walling, actually helped me, to look at the book and see and make comments. So thank you to everyone who did that. All 35 people who did that for me.
You had quite a list of women that you people, but a lot of women that you consulted.
I did. Yeah, I did.
Okay. Yeah.
And I listened to that advice, and it did change what I wrote a lot. I got a lot of advice from lots of people.
Okay, thank you so much. And you have a good night. And everybody out there, have a good night as well.
Thanks, Steve. Doris Short is there too. Doris, Steve, great.
Yeah, Steve and Doris.
Catherine Leggett. Oh, good. Thank you. Hello, Doris. See you later, Doris. I'm just down the road from you.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.